Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in today's video I want to talk about my favorite scale pattern to noodle in, which is pentatonic position 4. So that demo that you watched in the beginning, you probably realized that it didn't really sound very pentatonic-y, if that's a word. I don't know if that's a word or not. But that's okay because I just used that to identify the place on the fretboard where I wanted to solo. I figured out where to do that based on the chords that I was playing over, because the chords that you're playing over, they tell you what key you're playing in. So if you look at your circle of fifths, you'll see that the A minor chord and the F major chord, they're both in the same little grouping of 6 there. So in this key, the E chord should be minor, if you want it to be 100% in key, that is. But the chord is actually an E major chord, so that's the 1 out of key chord. So with this information, there's 3 different ways that you could approach soloing over this chord progression. Now, it's all going to be the same set of notes no matter which approach you do. It's just that depending on, which approach you choose, the way you think about it will maybe result in some different licks. Approach 1, you may do certain licks. Approach 2, you may do things a little differently. You may bend notes a little differently, or you may land on notes a little differently, or whatever. And then approach 3, you may do things yet even differently, even though it's going to be the same set of notes in all 3 approaches. So let's get into it now. So the first approach is to simply say, okay, this is the key of A minor, and then there's 1 out of key chord. That chord is out of key because it contains 1 single note that is not part of the overall key scale. The key scale for this key that we're playing in is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's no sharps, there's no flats. So if you see any sharp notes or flat notes, that instantly tells you that is an out-of-key note or an out-of-key chord if the chord contains that note. So we're in the key of A minor here, and we have 1 out-of-key chord. That is the E major chord. The reason it's out of key is because the notes that make up an E major chord are E, G sharp, and B. So that G sharp is your out of key note. Alright, so in order to locate pentatonic position number 4 for this key, you simply take your index finger and you put it on the scale root note on the A string. So the scale root note is A, because we're saying this is the key of A minor. So put that on the note A on the A string. So right there, 12th fret is the note A, and this is your pentatonic position 4. And then you can slide up a whole step on this high E string to hit the next A up there in the next octave. So it's not like a partially completed scale. And then these notes are part of it too. So that's your pentatonic position number 4 for this key. So now we can go ahead and we can add in our 2 missing diatonic notes, because remember, the pentatonic scale is just 5 notes. The full diatonic scale, the full key scale, is 7 notes. So let's do that. Of course, the notes on the low E string are part of it as well. Alright, so yeah, that's your diatonic scale. That's our main framework. So chord tone targeting always applies. You have your scale that you're playing and you play this over all the chords, but some notes sound better over the A minor chord, some notes sound better over the F major chord, some notes sound better over the E major chord. Because the E major chord contains that 1 single note that's out of key, that G sharp note, which happens to be 1/2 step below the note A. So anywhere you have an A, anywhere you have your scale root note, you just find the note that's 1/2 step lower than it, and that's going to be that G sharp note. Alright, so anytime that E major chord comes along, you can kind of aim for that 1 note that's out of the diatonic scale, that's out of the key, and that's going to connect with that chord. The second approach would be to look at that 1 note that was altered, that 1 note that falls a 1/2 step below the scale root note. It's that G sharp. To look at that note and say, okay, you know what, let's make a new scale out of this. Let's keep that G sharp in there, and then the note that falls before that note, which would be the note G, let's just eliminate that completely. So we're just going to have this new scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G sharp, back to A. That's called the harmonic minor scale. So if you look at the notes of the harmonic minor scale, you can then look at this chord progression and you can say, hey, the A, C, and E, which are the notes that make up the A minor chord, are all part of this harmonic minor scale, this A harmonic minor scale. The notes F, A, and C, which are the notes that make up the F major chord, are also all parts of this A harmonic minor scale. And then the notes E, G sharp, and B are also all part of this A harmonic minor scale. So why not just use the A harmonic minor scale over the entire chord progression? So in this case, you're basically saying that the harmonic minor scale is like a new key in and of itself. This is where things can get kind of crazy with the whole how many keys are there argument, because we're just looking at the harmonic minor scale. Keys come from the major scale. You know, there's 12 potential major scales. That's why we say there's 12 keys. But then you could say, oh, well, can't we just say that the harmonic minor scale makes keys as well? You know, you have 12 potential harmonic minor scales. You could say that, you know, and that's actually what we're doing in this approach. But then I guess you could do the same thing with the melodic minor scale. You know, you could make keys out of the melodic minor scale, and then you could make keys out of like the double harmonic minor scale and like the, I don't know, whatever. There's all kinds of scales out there. So, I mean, where does it stop, really? You know, so we just kind of limit it to how many keys there are to the major scales. That's the thing that makes the keys. But in this case, we're essentially saying we're making a key out of this harmonic minor scale. We're playing in the key of A harmonic minor. So yeah, you could just use this as your soloing framework over the entire thing, target chord tones of the underlying chords as the chord changes occur, and just say I'm playing in the key of A harmonic minor. It's just a different way to think about this. Now, this third approach might not make a lot of sense at first, but hear me out here. It's kind of fun to think about things this way, and it actually works. So instead of saying that we're using the A harmonic minor scale over the entire chord progression, we're going to say we're using the E Phrygian dominant scale over the entire chord progression. Now, you may be like, why are we going to use an E type of scale if it's in the key of A of some sort, if it's the key of A harmonic minor, you know? Why are we going to use an E type of scale? The Phrygian dominant scale is the fifth mode of the harmonic minor scale. So that means that the A harmonic minor scale shares the same notes as the E Phrygian dominant scale. So if you just kind of start on the note E of the A harmonic minor scale and then play through those 7 notes E to E, that's your E Phrygian dominant scale. It sounds like this. And you can just kind of play across all 6 strings. Alright, so that's your E Phrygian dominant scale. It's the same notes as the A harmonic minor scale. It's just a different way of thinking about this. Now, the reason this works is because if you're kind of thinking about this as an E type of scale, and you kind of like land all your phrases on the note E every time the chord progression starts back around, as opposed to kind of targeting the note A, as if you were thinking of it as A harmonic minor, thinking of it as E still works because E is a chord tone of the A minor chord. So every time the chord progression starts back over, you want to target a chord tone of the A minor chord, either an A, a C, or an E. So if you target the E every time, it's still going to sound good because it's still a chord tone. And when you target fifths, it tends to have like this dark type of sound. It's just the way I hear it. It's the way I kind of describe it. So yeah, so you're just kind of noodling around in the scale pattern, but every time the chord progression starts back over again, you land on that note E. And then I'm just going to kind of give you a fourth approach here, and this isn't really my preferred way to do things. I think this is kind of like too much thinking. That is to think one scale per chord. So if you want to think over the A minor chord, I'm playing the A Aeolian scale. And then over the F major chord, I'm playing the F Lydian scale. And then over the E major chord, I'm playing the E Phrygian dominant scale. If you want to do that, that's cool. You know, that's another approach that you could do, absolutely. But again, we're just kind of, we're just coming around to approach number one in that case. We were just kind of using the diatonic scale for the A minor chord and the F major chord, and then we were using the harmonic minor scale. We're throwing in that extra note for the E major chord. So you can see there's a bunch of different ways to go about this. The one thing I do like about this one scale per chord approach is usually when all the chords are part of the same key, I just kind of stick to one scale, and most people usually do that as well. But if there's out-of-key chords thrown into your chord progression, which is the case here, we have this E major chord being thrown into the chord progression, that's the time to throw in a different scale. So all the chords are part of the same key, one scale, chord tone target, donezo. An out-of-key chord comes along, two out-of-key chords come along, those are the chords to really switch up your scales. So over the A minor chord and the F major chord, which are part of the key, you just play the diatonic scale or the key scale or the A natural minor scale or whatever you want to call it. That's the thing that you do over those two chords. And then this E major chord comes along, the out-of-key chord, and that's when you switch it up, and then you say, okay, now it's time to do some fancy stuff. Now I'm going to play the A harmonic minor scale. Or if I want to call it the E Phrygian dominant scale, that works too. It's just a different name for the same thing. But the cool thing is, with this chord also, and I have a whole lesson about this, this is where you can throw in these fully diminished arpeggios, and that's what I did in the demo in the beginning. So starting on that harmonic minor note, starting on that G sharp note, which is the note that's always found one half step lower than the A. So here's your A here. So right below that is that G sharp, so you can start there, and then you can play this diminished arpeggio. Alright, so I have a whole lesson on these diminished arpeggios, so check that one out. It's how diminished arpeggios and the harmonic minor scale kind of go hand in hand. So that's just a cool thing you can do when you want to kind of throw a new scale in over that out-of-key chord. But anyway, that's going to do it for today's video. So if you have any questions or comments, as always, feel free to ask. Thanks for watching. See you next time.